Just to open up, I'm sending our negotiation team down to the White House to try to finish up the negotiations with the White House. There's a number of places that we are still far apart. I mean, it didn't seem like it'd be this hard. I remember even talking to the incoming Democratic leader before I was even Speaker about ways that we could work together on a debt ceiling. Hakeem told me he was going to follow the president's lead. I went down to meet with the president right after becoming Speaker, as you all know, on February 1st. I said, let's sit down, let's work together. The Democrats, they could have lifted the debt ceiling prior to me becoming Speaker. They knew the outcome of the election already. They knew we were taking power. They passed an omnibus bill, but they decided not to do the rising of the debt ceiling, even though they thought people should just raise it cleanly. Speaking with the president, I told him two things. We'll not raise taxes. Why? Because we got more revenue coming in to our coffers at any time in American history. The problem is the Democrats had been in power and they increased the amount of spending to the highest level we've ever had at any time in American history, especially to GDP. And now we have the highest debt at any time to American history. So I just think it's common sense, it's reasonable and it's rational that we spend less next year than we spend this year. Every household would do this. We have money that sits out there, COVID, that's been appropriate that hasn't been used. We now know the damage that the Democrats have done in the majority when they spent that extra $6 trillion. It brought us inflation, harming every single family, made us more dependent upon China. It created 3 of the largest 4 bank failures in American history in the last couple months. We cannot continue down this path. But the president waited 97 days, not even to talk to me. He could have spoken to me and said we were wrong on other angles, but he didn't. And now we're 8 days away from Biden having default. I don't want that to happen. That's why the Republicans in the House in April lifted the debt ceiling with common sense, sensible things, that pulling the COVID money back, work requirements, they let people go back to work, help our supply chain, make us less dependent on China, and more importantly, people working, then they're paying into Social Security and Medicare, making those 2 entities stronger. And then making us stronger in our energy field where we're cutting the red tape, where we could build things in America again, putting people back to work. That's reasonable, that's rational. But it sits in the Senate. But if the president waits too long, he can always take that up.
You said,
Yes.
finish the negotiations. Has there been appreciable progress over the last
Look,
24 hours?
there's differences. We know where it's at. You have to spend less than you spent last year. That's not that difficult to do. But in Washington, somehow, that is a problem. They have increased spending with the Democrats in the majority on discretionary spending by more than 33%. No household's been able to afford to do that. We can find waste, we can eliminate that. The president eliminated a lot of places that we can't talk about, so I've got a short area to do it, but we found a reasonable way to do it. So it's not that, look, I think we can make progress today. I'm hoping that we can make progress.
Mr. Speaker, what do you say to those who believe you can't get to yes because so many members of your conference won't accept anything less than the bill you've already passed?
They're wrong. You know, you underestimated me the whole time. The one thing you should learn from me, I will never give up for the American people. Those are the people I'm looking at. Can we get to yes? Yes. We passed a bill.
With no Democrats. You need a bipartisan bill now. Can you get to yes on a deal that will take Democrats?
Thank you, because you just identified the problem. No Democrats. So every Democrat voted against raising the debt ceiling. Nothing has happened in the Senate. I'm not a senator. I don't control the Senate. Why didn't they pass something? The president, he didn't talk to us for 97 days. So don't blame me for reaching out to the Democrats, for begging the president to meet with me, or trying to find it. And don't blame us, Republicans, when we put a reasonable bill together that we actually took Democrats' ideas. So when we put spending for government and increase it 1% each year to cap it, so the slow growth of government, so the economy can catch up, that was a Democrat idea. When we put work requirements in to help people get a job, that's something Senator Biden voted for and President Clinton signed into law. That was a Democrat-supported idea too. So it's not my fault that the Democrats today have become so extreme, so far to the socialist wing, that they are now opposed to work requirements, that they are now opposed to saving $1 less than you spent the year before. That to me really seemed that the problem are the Democrats.
Mr. Speaker, but the White House says they're trying to meet you halfway. So, I mean, at this stage of the game, since you are at loggerheads, what is the off-ramp here?
Look, the off-ramp here is to solve the problem, to spend less than we spent last year. That's not that difficult. They still want to spend more. You cannot do that. No household would do that. Look, I explained this before.
Their plan is unreasonable.
Well, they don't have a plan. They never passed anything. So, and you can't spend more money the next year than you spent this year. Look, I've explained this before. A debt ceiling, so the American people understand, is having a credit card. You raised and you hit the limit. So year after year, you just kept raising the limit. So you're paying more interest. So now in America, 17 cents out of every dollar that comes in just goes to interest. But now you owe so much on your credit card. You have to pay it. But you owe more than you make in an entire year. So now for America, we owe more on our debt than our whole economy is worth, 20% more. So should you just raise the debt limit, or should you literally think, let's eliminate some waste? If we had spent money, billions of dollars, for a pandemic that money has sat there for 2 years, pull it back. If we can have a provision to help people find jobs, let's do that. If we can find a way that cut red tape to let people go back and build things in America and make us energy independent and not beholden to China, let's do that. That's all we're asking. We're being reasonable.
The fact that you're going to need Democratic votes, probably in the House, definitely in the Senate. You have a Democrat in the White House. Why not offer a single concession beyond saying we're not going to default?
We've offered a lot of concessions. The cap on the spending is a Democrat idea.
They want to
The
freeze
work,
spending, you
the
said
work
no.
requirement was a Democrat idea.
You're
The
opposed to
time, I can't help it if the Democrats have become so extreme and now is a party of Bernie Sanders than the party where Joe Biden was elected. Joe Biden is the president of the United States. He is the head Democrat. But if AOC and Bernie Sanders is going to run their party, that's not my fault. I'm not even sure Bernie Sanders is a registered Democrat.
Mr. Speaker, if the president does not agree to exactly what you want, are you willing to blow past this
Okay,
first deadline?
first of all, your premise of your question is all wrong. When have I ever said you have to agree to 100% of what I want? All I've ever said to the president from February 1st, let's talk. There's only a couple things I will not do, Mr. President. I will not raise taxes. Why? Because we are bringing more revenue in, even to the GDP, not just to the 50-year average, but the history of America. Only 2 other times have we brought in 20% of the GDP, 1944 and 2000. I will not put a clean debt ceiling on the floor. Why? Because we've spent more than we've ever spent before and we have the highest debt than we ever had before. I just don't think that's right. But no, let me finish the question. And then I said to the president, but everything else is on the table. For 97 days, he wouldn't talk to me. So we passed the bill. We're not getting everything in our bill. I'm negotiating with the president. We passed a bill that raised the debt ceiling. If I did what you're saying, we wouldn't be talking. But I sit and I'm sitting and sending our negotiation team down with theirs, their team is highly respected on both sides of the aisle. They know this House and Senate well, and I know together. And maybe you discounted me too. I didn't win Speaker on the first vote. It took 15 rounds. And you know what? I think we're stronger for it. And it's probably we didn't solve this problem on the first negotiation, but it took us 97 days. I firmly believe that we'll be able to get there. Yes, sir.
Your negotiators yesterday said that the concession Democrats were getting was to raise the debt ceiling. So within the room there, what concession are you willing to give in order to save the economy?
I'm willing to make America stronger, to curb inflation, less dependency on China, and spend less than we spent the year before. Because you know what? When we're elected, the power is loaned to us from the American public. Who's representing them? It's not my responsibility to represent the socialist wing of the Democratic Party. If the Democrat socialist wing and Bernie Sanders cared so much, they would have passed the bill. They would have done something on the border. It is not my fault they won't take action. It is not my fault that the president would not meet with me for 97 days. I'm sorry. But the moment he was willing to meet with me, I've been there each and every day. And I firmly believe we will get and solve this problem.
Mr. Speaker, how much time will you give your conference to read the debt ceiling bill once an agreement is reached?
72 hours.
Mr. Speaker, can I get clarity on that?
Yes.
Thank you. Jack Richards. Could I ask you a couple questions on popcorn to my colleague Melina from our sister outlet, NCD?
Okay, ask your question.
Okay. So, are you afraid that voters will blame Republicans for this crisis and any possible default? And what gives you hope that a deal can still be reached?
Well, first of all, I don't think there'll be a default, and I don't see how you would blame Republicans. If there's any blame Republicans have, we're the only ones who acted. So if the American public didn't want if they get rewarded for not taking an action and ignoring a problem, the Democrats are going to win that award every day. They did that with Title 42 on the border. They've done that with inflation. They lied to us and told us it was transitory. They did that with the debt ceiling. They told us we shouldn't talk. So I'm sorry. If you want to blame Republicans for solving problems, we'll take that blame. Yes.
Thank you. Will you blame progressives then if we default?
Look, I'm not. The only thing I look at, if the Democrats control the Senate and they control the White House, and they wouldn't even do a bill and they wouldn't even communicate, I don't think I have to say who's to blame. If the Republicans have passed a bill that raised the debt ceiling, did it in a responsible, sensible way, I think the American public understand that. But first of all, let me tell the American public, I am not going to give up. We're not going to default. We're going to solve this problem. I will stay with it until we can get it done. But let's be honest about this. We have to spend less than we spent last year. It is not my fault that the Democrats cannot give up on their spending. And you would think, if you have the most revenue in the history of coming in, but when the Democrats were in power, they spent the most money. So we have the most expenses going out, the expenditures. It's not a revenue problem, it's a spending problem. And then you have the highest amount of debt. Don't you think that would finally wake them up to be sensible? Now, look, I don't want to point things out, but we have a new here with CNN. I just heard on your news station that 60% of Americans believe the debt ceiling should only be raised after you found savings. So, to your question, I think we're representing the American public, and that's what we'll continue to do.